So we got a bit of a weird one today, folks, and we're going to be talking about limited run games, a somewhat polarizing force when it comes to the physical game medium. Now, I don't hate limited run games. I do question some of the decisions that they make. Of course, there was the whole plumbers don't wear ties fiasco where it was like a CDR of a 3DO game, and it's like, what's the point? Like, you might as well have just burned your own CDR if that's going to be the case, if it's not going to be pressed on the disc itself. But for the most part, they do all right with bringing digital games into a physical realm. Now, myself personally, I've stopped kind of buying a lot of limited run games because I just don't care anymore. Like, the last thing I bought was the Jurassic Park collection, like the big box thing for the Nintendo Switch, just because I love Jurassic Park. It didn't really have anything to do with me wanting those games physically, because I own most of those games physically. But recently they did a slew of some new games, including Yakuza 0 for the PS4 and the Xbox. And what's interesting about this is the Xbox version was a brand new version of the game. Essentially, they had released it. Sega had put it out on Xbox, and this was the first time that you could get a physical edition of that game. But the PS4 edition was something that already existed. You could go out there right now and buy a greatest hits edition or a standard edition of Yakuza 0 that originally released almost a decade ago for the PlayStation 4. So for limited run games to be re-releasing this game was kind of a questionable decision, but hey, maybe you prefer to have a new copy of it, because the mentality of limited run games, as far as we have been told as the consumer, is that you are getting the utmost complete version of the game on the physical disc or physical cartridge. So if DLC is added into a game, a lot of times they will wait to release that game until the DLC is out so that they can release it with the DLC on the disc or cartridge. That's kind of the whole point of it, is to get a physical version of something that might only exist digitally and get the most updated version of that game, so that if you were to purchase the game digitally, your physical experience that you of course own and have ownership of will be up to date with the digital stuff. Now, I do understand sometimes patches come along and stuff like that that can sort of negate that or cause problems with it, but for the most part, I mean, they do an okay job with that. I think that's something that they do a good job of. But obviously we're talking about Yakuza for some reason today, and this recent release of Yakuza 0, because now people are starting to get their copies of Yakuza 0, and well, there's a big problem here. This is coming to us from Does It Play via Spin-54. Does It Play has actually been getting some coverage on this channel recently, so I went ahead and followed. Oh, you can't see that I followed him because I moved my camera up there, but you can see the Marshall Dillon fan club. I wonder who's in the Marshall Dillon fan club. Maybe one day I will reveal this. But Does It Play is basically a account that looks at like physical stuff and make sure that, you know, everything is in line with what a physical game should be. You don't have to download an update. You don't have to download a patch. You know, everything is on there. It doesn't require an internet connection in order to play the game or something like that. And they say, looks like something went wrong with the limited run games releases for the Yakuza series. Contrary to their claims that it would be the most up-to-date version, it's still the 1.00 build that initially released, found out by user Spin-54. And you can see here, they have popped in the game, and it's version 1.00. Same thing with Kiwami. And you could see here a Discord message done between someone, I don't know if Pika Greg is Spin-Dash or whatever the case may be. Do we know if the disc build on the PS4 Yakuza releases will be different / updated compared to the other retail copies? Meaning the original copies were obviously 1.0. Since then, subsequent updates have been done to the game. And so will this be, you know, reflective of the initial release, or will this be the updated stuff that will be available on the disc? Limited Run Jeremy says, whatever is the current on the digital storefront prior to manufacturing, that will be the build. Well, that's not necessarily the case here, because this is almost a decade old game and it's still version 1.0. And then you get into this. Why people would buy these re-releases is beyond me. I didn't even think for a second they would have had the complete builds on the disc pertaining to Yakuza. Shame about Penny's Big Breakaway, though. They bought it because an updated disc was promised by LRG. So that's kind of the whole point of this. People are buying this version of Yakuza to have the updated stuff on the disc. And what I find very interesting involves Penny's Big Breakaway, because Penny's Big Breakaway is a game that did get subsequent updates as it was available on the marketplace. And really, the biggest update that it got, and let me check something real quick here. We're going to do a little bit of a live thing because I didn't look this up prior, and I probably should have. Okay, perfect. This is perfect. So Penny's Big Breakaway did get a standard edition for Xbox, PS5, and the Nintendo Switch. Now, what's interesting about this is, because this is now shipping, if this is version 1.0 of Penny's Big Breakaway, might not be the biggest deal in the world on the Xbox and the PlayStation 5, but on the Nintendo Switch, boy oh boy is it. Because Penny's Big Breakaway, when it initially released on the Nintendo Switch, was a 30 frame per second game. And since the game came out with a digital release, the company behind it has since added in a 60 frames per second mode to the Switch 1 version of the game. So if you're buying this cartridge, and I'm not sure if it's 1.0, but kind of deducing that, based on those prior comments, it does seem like it might be that is the case with this, then you are missing out on a major feature that was added to the game after the initial digital release. And, I thought that was kind of the whole point of limited run games, was to get the most up-to-date complete version of the game on the physical medium. That's why they wait for DLC to be released of some games. Look at Retromania Wrestling. Retromania Wrestling was announced by Limited Run Games, but they wanted to wait to do the physical edition because of the DLC that was coming out. Now the DLC is coming out in September. Is the DLC going to be a part of that too? Like, you would assume it would be, but then you have to kind of raise these questions, because what if it's not the most up-to-date version of the game? Or what if they've changed their mind since the few years ago that they announced it? And like, look, I'm not trying to rag on them or anything like that. This isn't a smear campaign. This isn't a hate video or anything like that. I'm just simply proposing questions with this, that if you are telling people that it's going to be the most up-to-date version of the game, and then it's not the most up-to-date version of the game, that's a problem. I don't think there's any other way to chop it up. I think that is a problem, especially with something like Yakuza 0, which is already released on the PlayStation 4 prior, and this is like a re-release. And I think the biggest thing that's going on right now is Limited Run Games is starting to work with a lot of major companies, because major companies are starting to shy away from having to put the physical release onus upon themselves. They're wanting to, send that to someone else. And you see companies like Sega who are working hand in hand with Limited Run Games. And I don't think that's an anomaly. I think that's something that's going to become more of a standard with companies, and a standard with certain companies that don't want to do physical stuff. Looking at Xbox Bethesda stuff, like, I could see that ending up becoming, more and more prevalent within the realm of games getting physical releases. But if the physical release is not being taken care of in the same manner that a digital release is, or if we're rushing to get the game out, and I understand you can't sort of predict. You can't sort of predict when a game is going to get an update, this, that, and the other. But I think with Yakuza 0 being such an old game for the PlayStation 4, you kind of knew what you were getting into with that. And having to download something additionally is a problem, because it negates the whole point of buying the game physically and not having to require an internet connection. I can't say that Penny's Big Breakaway doesn't have the updated 60 frames per second patch on the Switch 1 version, because I don't have it. But if it doesn't, that is a major problem. That is something that needs to be addressed, and something that, I don't know. I'm just simply posing some questions for you guys. And like I said, I don't hate the company. You know, I think they do some good stuff, but some of these questionable decisions need to be ironed out. You know, I don't know if it's a cost-cutting thing, this, that, or the other, just an oversight. But, you know, when you're messing with people's money like that, dude, like, you need to be locked in. You need to make sure all your T's are crossed and all your I's are dotted, because you are essentially, you know, making a product for a somewhat niche audience. And that niche audience is some of the hardest nosed people when it comes to games, because they want their physical. If they wanted the game digitally, they would have bought it for $5 when it was on sale. They want that ownership. They want something in their hand. And if what you're putting in their hand is not what they expected, you're going to lose trust. And people are going to be a lot more hesitant to buy some of your products, especially when you are saying in Discord that it is the most updated version of the game. But that's just my thoughts on this. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section down below. Are you someone who picked up these games? If you picked up Penny's Big Breakaway for the Switch 1 and you have gotten the game, please comment in the comment section and let me know if there is the 60 frames per second mode for the Switch 1 version of the game on the cartridge. I am hopeful that that is. I was just kind of using that as an example, but it's kind of an example to show you that sometimes updates are more than just like a little bug fix or something like that. Sometimes they are doing something substantial. And as always, guys, thank you for checking out this video. If you are new to the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Be sure to like, comment, and share. Hit the bell as well. And as always, I'll catch you guys on the next video. Later.